Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 13th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw number 2018, number 7272. Question period sign-up sheet is on the table to the double doors to my left. For agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question relating to agenda item, would you please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted the authority to join us electronically this morning. I'm not seeing anybody yet. Is that correct? All right. The first item is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Worship. For late items this morning, we have agenda item 6H, Nanaimo Area Land Trust funding. We're adding a delegation from Paul Chapman from Nanaimo Area Land Trust.
Very
that's
good.
it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no presentations, and on to a lengthy series of reports. And the first is the Nanaimo Youth Resilience Grants 2023. And Mr. Lindsay, you're going to introduce this and the others to follow. Thank you. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and good morning, Council. First item on your agenda today, we're looking for the committee's endorsement of staff's recommendations around the grant program, and this is money that was received under the Public Safety Canada's Building Safer Communities Fund. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wood, who has a brief presentation to walk you through the report and the recommendations. But I would just note that this has been very much a joint initiative between community planning and Parks, Rec and Culture, and Ms. Osborne has also joined us this morning. So if there's questions at the end from the committee, and both will be available to answer your questions. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Wood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wood. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Really pleased to be presenting the proposed Nanaimo Youth Resilient Grant allocations with funds, as Mr. Lindsay has said, from Public Safety Canada through the Building Safer Communities Fund. I think many of us will remember back in May 2022, the city was allocated $1.8 million from Public Safety Canada to develop and implement a strategic plan to address gun and gang violence here in the city of Nanaimo. In May, staff, along with consultants with the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention, presented Council a strategic three-year plan, which is called the Nanaimo Youth Resilience Strategy, to prevent youth from engaging in gun and gang violence. The plan, if you'll remember, includes 6 key focus areas. They include safe youth gathering spaces, so spaces that are free, safe within existing facilities, to build on youth outreach and to really expand youth outreach to meet basic needs of our vulnerable youth. Connecting youth to land and water through Sinaiwith, so really connecting youth at risk with connections to land and water to strengthen that mental, emotional, spiritual, and cultural resilience. Youth mentoring, we heard a lot that youth really need to be able to connect with diverse role models and significant caring adults to do really well in life. Enhancing existing programs, and so that's by adding new components that fill gaps and build protective factors, and media and communication to really develop key messaging to highlight successful youth programs and to address discrimination and stigma against youth. In June of this year, Council directed staff to proceed with a 3-year contribution agreement with Public Safety Canada and to use the Building Safer Communities Fund to implement the strategy, including the key focus areas. On July 10th, the city launched the Nanaimo Youth Resilient Grant application process, and this work included launching a dedicated webpage, a press release, an email update to community agencies, and we also hosted an information session, which was then recorded and posted on our webpage for future reference. The closing date for applications was on August 14th, and I'm really pleased to say that we received 23 applications, which is quite a lot considering the short time frame that Public Safety Canada gave us. At the Nanaimo Youth Resilience Strategy Steering Committee meeting on June 28th of this year, members developed an evaluation criteria and a committee to evaluate the grant applications received from the community. The grant guidelines and criteria that were created are attached in Attachment A of the report for your review. The evaluation committee consisted of steering committee members who did not submit a grant application and sector representation from Parks, Recreation and Culture, Community Planning, and the business community. Each application was scored based on relevance, accessibility, equity, impact, efficiency, and sustainability. Applications that received the highest score were selected by the evaluation committee and were presented to the overall steering committee on August 23rd for consideration. The top scoring applications addressed the 6 focus areas, included opportunities for partnership and coordination of activities. And that was really important to the steering committee to make sure that we were implementing the strategy and really being coordinating and making sure that all the programs were aligning together. Based on the evaluations, the steering committee is recommending that $1,611,149 be allocated over the next 3 years from October 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2026 to the following programs and initiatives that are shown in the table within your report and above. In addition, successful applicants will be asked to enter into a service agreement with the city. The funds will be distributed biannually starting on October 1st, 2023, and service agencies will receive funds in advance every 6 months once the reporting requirements for prior period are received. This is important because this ensures that we are meeting our funding agreement with Public Safety Canada as well. In addition, where applicable, service agreements will include the requirement to coordinate activities between service providers to ensure alignment of programs and youth gathering spaces. As mentioned, we received a total of 23, and most applications were very well written and had some really good ideas about how to meet the needs of youth. Unfortunately, we sometimes think 1.6 million is a lot. It's limited funds. A lot of work was done by grant applicants, the steering committee, and the evaluation committee to promote partnerships and coordinate programs, and this really allowed us to ensure activities were aligned, and it also helped to reduce any overhead costs where possible. All 6 focus areas are addressed in the proposed programs and initiatives being presented to the Finance and Audit Committee this morning. Safe youth gathering spaces were identified as one of the key focus areas as potentially having the highest impact for youth at risk, but was also noted as requiring the most effort. I'm pleased to say that through collaboration with agencies and applicants, there are 6 proposed safe youth gathering spaces providing options in the north, central, and south ends of the city. 2 of the locations target youth aged 11 to 13, which we felt was really important to try to catch them even more upstream, allowing the programs and initiatives to serve a much broader group of youth. At this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that the Finance and Audit Committee may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock, then Councillor Hemmons, please.
I was just going to move the report, the recommendations.
We have a seconder. Second, Councillor Thorpe. Go ahead, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you. Just from the initial announcement of the funding and the strategic plan, I'm super pleased how this money has ended up working into the community, and it looks like a significant expansion of services directly to youth. Building on what's already been there. So thanks a lot for the work.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I'll repeat Councillor Gesselbrock's remarks. This is really exciting, a real infusion of dollars into a much needed services for youth. I'm curious, with the proposed safe youth gathering spaces, will those be staffed by school district or nonprofits? I note in our chart here that the city is, we're going to have city staff support the drop-in centers. So if I could just have an understanding of how they'll be staffed and whether that will be fluid, and is it collaborative? I heard you say collaborative, but just a bit more info.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Hemmons. A really good question. We really wanted to do business a little bit differently, so we really worked on making sure that there was partnerships kind of established, and that was one of the guidelines and the criteria that we really focused on is the partnership aspect. So really pleased to say that we will have staff from school district, we will have some support staff from city, we also have staff from nonprofits who will also be staffing within the same space. So we actually have a really, and maybe Ms. Osborne could talk a little bit about it, but we do have a great partnership with BGC and the city. So we will be continuing that partnership with these youth spaces, as well as the school district is bringing outside agencies to also be partnering and providing programs within the school spaces as well. So it's really exciting to see everybody come together. And I really feel like the steering committee of this project has really worked hard to make sure that there was partnerships there, so that we really could focus on programming for youth and reduce any costs and really make our dollar go as far as possible.
Okay. Councillor Gesselbrock has a question, and then Councillor Perino.
Thanks. Just through you, I'm just curious, will attendance be recorded just as sort of data, just to look at sort of how well utilized the services were?
Yeah, really good question. Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock. That is one of the reporting requirements that's required to Public Safety Canada. So that will be reporting requirements that we require through our service agreement. I think it's helpful for us, but it's also required as part of the evaluation process. If you'll remember that Public Safety Canada is really trying to create a baseline, because any programs that do really well in these communities that have been identified across the country will be tried to be implemented in other communities to work with youth at risk. So that piece is going to be really important, and I think it will really also help our work through the city, through Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and even through social planning.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perino, and then Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Woods. So you addressed a lot of it with Councillor Gesselbrock. I just wanted to ask you about the evaluation process that you will go through for the next 3 years and how you'll implement that. And is this money being used simply for the cause, or does it go to any of their operating funds, or in some cases I understand that would be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Perino. So we have strict kind of expenditure guidelines through Public Safety Canada, and of course staffing is usually your most expensive budget line item in these types of programs. And so this is why we really worked to, for example, Nanaimo Food Share, they will be delivering program in the safe youth gathering spaces. So this is where we're trying to make those connections to make the dollars reach as far as possible. And so I'll be working, with the service agencies to make sure that, we measure those inputs and those outputs, and we set up indicators, performance measure indicators right from the get-go, because we will be required to report those as well to Public Safety Canada.
Excellent, excellent. So that if something goes wrong with any one of them, you can put them back on track, or we can readdress it at another time. Is that right?
Yes, we do have the ability through this funding to take a step back, and if something's not working, to redefine a program, or even make some adjustments, or maybe expand another program.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Councillor Perino asked most of my questions, but I just wondered, for applicants who weren't successful in being recommended for funding, will they receive any feedback about how they might be able to address the concerns from the steering committee, and will they perhaps, have they been ranked so that if one of the selected groups isn't able to use the funding, it would go to someone next down the list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Eastmere. So we did send out an email to all applicants letting them know about the proposed projects that will be brought forth this morning. We did have 8 applications that just weren't eligible for funding based on the Public Safety Canada requirements. And then you're right, the rest are all scored, and we do have that information. And, I've offered to the service agencies to reach out. I'm happy to talk about their application. And then, of course, we've also recommended that they apply for social planning grants, which will be open this fall, because a lot of the projects will be eligible. And like I said, just with 23 applications, we really had to, there were so many good programs. It's such a hard job to do, but we're hoping that they can receive some funds through social planning grants.
Awesome. I'm really happy to hear that, and the social planning grants are a great program, so hopefully they'll be able to take advantage of that. Yeah. Thank you.
I have to ask this, and forgive me, because I suspect some members of the public who are involved in these other organizations may ask it. One of the recipients as proposed is the City of Nanaimo, and the money has come to us. How do we explain there's no conflict, and how did the process work with respect to that? Mm-hmm. Ms. Osborne? please.
I think the best way for us to define what we're looking to do with this funding is to enhance the programs that we're already offering in our upstream solutions for youth in our community. We're looking to work with the BGC and expand the programs that we're running at the Nanaimo Aquatic Center, which are already showing success, but have been very limited in our ability to offer extended services. So we're looking to expand the days that we can offer that safe space at the Aquatic Center, as well as the age groups that we can provide the service to. We are also looking to develop and grow the recreation prescription program, which is also the expansion of a pilot project that we did in 2018 with Vancouver Island University, a program which identifies children or youth who are unable to participate in recreation and or social programs, and it connects them to the different recreation services that are upstream solutions, and takes them through that process of learning more about the lifestyle that they should be learning. I think that Mr. Harding might have more he can speak to on the recreation prescription and social prescription programming, as he was part of the pilot project in 2018.
Mr. Harding, please.
Thank you, Worship. Ms. Osborne covered it, but we're also be bringing an updated presentation with Vancouver Island University and also another partner, which is School District 68. And if council members, previous council members, we did a presentation at the time showing the interdisciplinary approach that VIU takes with the recreation prescription, which may get a new name, which would be more social prescribing. But that program was amazing. It was reaching a number of schools and age group of grade 5, putting them through a 12-week program, which was everything from health, active lifestyle, healthy eating, and a number of different programs. So that's the project we'd like to proceed now with VIU and school district for a 3-year program, and this funding will help assist that go forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley and then Councillor Hemmings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. I really support this. I'm just curious about a couple of things. You mentioned Nanaimo Food Share is going to be providing food at the different safe spaces, and I'm curious, there's a couple of other organizations that aren't directly tied to the safe spaces, so Big Brothers, Multicultural Society, and the Hornets Club. Are they going to be working in these safe spaces to provide workshops, or what? How are they involved in this process?
Yeah, great question. Through your worship to Councillor Manley, I know that the Nanaimo Food Share will be offering food, but also we're offering workshops within the Safe Youth Gathering spaces. And in addition, the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society will be offering these workshops within the existing Safe Youth Gathering spaces. It's not quite clear, but they are working in partnership. So we will be working with them to identify out of these 6 spaces what would work best for them and the youth that they're targeting in that. And then, of course, the Nanaimo Rugby Club, they will be working within the schools. So a lot of the, Georgia Elementary as well as Pleasant Valley, so they'll be tied into those connections as well. So basically it'll kind of spill into the outdoors as well. So that's kind of, how we're connecting those. And if I may, I think, for our listeners too, we opened up the grant applications. It was just over 1.4 million that we were calling. And because of the way we were able to leverage the funds, we are actually providing over $1.6 million in direct programming, including the work that Parks, Recreation, and Culture is doing through the youth space as well as prescription projects. So we've been able to actually, up some of those funds direct to youth programming.
Great. And so Big Brothers, Big Sisters, they'll be doing something similar through safe spaces, or?
Yes, they will be working with some of the safe spaces, but also offering some of the workshops within their location as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmings?
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to staff. I'm noting in the chart of who's getting what, that each of the programs are doing new things that touch upon the strategy, but also enhancing existing programs. And I'm always curious about, we get new funding opportunities, and obviously we're grateful and they're amazing, but often the work that's already being done just needs more resources. And so I'm curious, if you can speak at all to the ratio of the funding coming in and supporting programs that are already on the ground and proven and running well versus having these organizations kind of dreaming up new ideas as well. Do you have any sense of that ratio?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Hemmons. I don't have like exact percentages, but I know, that was the challenge, I think, at the very beginning, was for us to talk about how we can support existing. Because, our nonprofits work so hard, and we're trying to stretch them thin all the time, and a lot of grant funding that comes out says you need to do something new. So with Public Safety Canada, we did negotiate, what about, here's our risk factors that we have in Nanaimo. We do have some programs that are working well. How can we create that baseline and actually support the work that's going on? And so if you look in the strategy, there is a whole list of components, and it could be that we're targeting a different segment of youth. It could be that we're adding certain curriculum if it's like socio, emotional kind of learning within an existing program. Public Safety Canada was okay to say that was a significant addition to that program to be able to expand it. So if you look at the table, considerably, a lot of them are using, through their existing programs, enhancing it to either deliver a youth space or to expand on youth mentoring. And so I think it does provide some support to folks on the ground that are already doing the work through their programming. And so that's kind of how we were able to kind of continue that sport, but also create that baseline to see if we're actually making a difference and moving the needle.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any further speakers. Motion's been made. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the consideration of other grants. Ms. Mercer, good morning. You and Ms. Slater.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll hand the next three reports over to Ms. Slater to walk the committee through the recommendations that are in these reports.
Ms. Slater, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Your Worship, Council. So the first report for us to look at is consideration of other grants. We've received two applications, separate applications, under the City of Nanaimo's Other Grants program for consideration. The first one is an application from Nanaimo Minor Baseball Association for funding for the hosting of the 15U AA provincials that happened this summer. The grant request is for $5,000. Last year, the city awarded a $5,000 grant for the hosting of the 13U AAA provincials, and this came in under the emergency funding category of the Other Grants program. The staff recommendation in the report is to deny the other grant request because the Other Grants program isn't generally intended to provide annual funding for sport hosting events, and because the Other Grants budget has been fully expended for this year. The other grant application under consideration is from the Nanaimo Food Share Society for assistance with the cost of the facility rental, and this is for the Bebin Centennial Building that's used for the Good Food Box program. So every Thursday, a team of approximately 20 volunteers come out and they help unpack and sort thousands of pounds of produce into bags that are distributed to people in need across the city. The cost of renting the facility has recently increased, and the Society is asking for an in-kind grant of approximately $6,650 to offset the increased cost of using that building. Because the Other Grants program has been fully expended for this year, the report recommendation is to deny the other grant request. However, if Council did want to support this request, the Strategic Infrastructure Fund could be used for this purpose, and the projected closing balance of this reserve at the end of this current year is $1.794 million. And that's my introduction for the first Other Grants report.
Thank you very much. Any question? Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just looking at these applications. The one for minor baseball, it says their income is $291,000 and their expenses are $256,000. So that it's kind of odd to me that they'd be asking for additional funds from the city. With the food share grant, their income is $431,000 and their expenses are $432,000. So it's odd that they're asking for $6,000. I'm just wondering about precedent in the Centennial Building, when we rent it out to the market, the farmers market, do they get any break? Are we giving breaks to other organizations for similar uses in the community?
Sorry, through you, Worship, to you, Councillor Manley. That is a question I don't know the answer to about the farmers market. I do know that we've provided in-kind facility grants earlier this year for, was it volunteer Nanaimo, I believe?
Okay.
Councillor Eastmere. Oh, sorry, Mr. Harding. Couldn't ignore you.
Your Worship, just to answer Mr. Manley's question, if you remember about 2 months ago, we came a report back based on the rental specifically for the farmers market. And so they get the nonprofit, we work with them on the nonprofit rate for the Centennial Building. And so we're trying to work with those groups. There's as Council recalls, when we went through our fees and charges, there's a bit of a sliding scale. Based if you're a youth nonprofit, adult nonprofit, and fees go up. So we try to put groups and organizations within those categories.
So there's a process. It's already established.
Yeah, through bylaw.
In terms of fees, and this is outside of that, this request.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
If Your Worship, if I could just mention one aspect though on the, it's semi-related to your point about sport groups that are put on major tournaments looks like they're making a profit. We strongly encourage these because of the sports tourism and the groups and organizations coming to town. So we do expect groups to actually, because it helps fund the rest of their programs, but it also brings in a lot of that activity into the community, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, everything else. So it's something we've tried to encourage through different granting programs. And we are hoping to bring back to council an updated sports and events grant program for 2024, which may help address some of these requests.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Eastmere, sorry.
I would like to move option 2, which would be to deny the other grant for the first group and award it for Nanaimo Food Share, because I think that's consistent with our priorities around food security. The Good Food Box program, I think, is a really important one and is becoming increasingly important for especially low-income residents as food becomes, as fresh, healthy food becomes beyond reach for a lot of people. Given the amount of volunteers who help with this program and the amount of needy people that it's helping, I really think that this would be a good expenditure of some of our strategic infrastructure dollars. And I'd be interested to hear other people's thoughts on this. But of course, I need a seconder.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Gesselbrock? Go ahead.
I just have a question. So they're asking for roughly $6,650. Is that the amount that the rental of whatever space they have in the city, in the Centennial Building increased in 1 year?
Oh, sorry, through the chair to you, Councillor Gesselbrock. Yes, that $6,650 is 52 weeks, a 52-week rental period, the increased cost of the rental.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's quite substantial amount for things to increase, and I know there was a 7-year lag since the last time we updated our user rate for that. Okay. Yeah, I think there's going to be a time of transition while service groups get used to that change, and probably reflects a bit of inflation, and I think especially for nonprofits, the increase of the money coming into them doesn't always reflect what the new costs are, and so I think this is quite a legitimate reason to provide another grant and support them continuing to provide this service to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm a little concerned about precedent here, and so my question is, how many other groups rent the Centennial Building with a strong volunteer base, with a strong social ethic? Because I imagine there's quite a few.
Your Worship, if I could take that, I would say probably 95% of the groups that rent most of our facilities are either nonprofit or groups that are providing a community benefit. That's why we work hard on our fees and charges and bring them to council and create them into a bylaw so council can see what they all still get subsidized. All our rates are subsidized to some extent, and so those are the rates that we've come up with. And we still think our rate increases were relatively conservative, even though we haven't had an increase since 2016. So, so a lot of our groups are definitely are going to. This will affect every group. So if you have a precedent, this one, I'm assuming you will get other groups coming to you.
Thanks for that, and I think that's the tidal wave that I'm a bit worried about. And we were responsible for changing our fees bylaws, and I absolutely take Councillor Eastmere's point that this is a valuable organization providing a valuable service to the community. But if we dip into our strategic infrastructure fund every time a valuable group comes asking for this, we should just go back and change the fees bylaw. And that was a relatively recent decision. So I agree with the intention behind it, but I can't support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a couple of thoughts through you, if I may. I tend to agree with Councillor Hemmond's comments in terms of precedent. And having sat at this table for a number of years now, I know that it's not easy to make grant recommendations, and it's even harder to deny grant applications. And at one time, council took that upon themselves. And it was a very, very political discussion in those days, and there was favoritism shown by people who had sympathies with certain groups and not with others. And since then, I think we've evolved to a better situation where staff in an unbiased role makes recommendations based on council policy and bylaws. And so I certainly acknowledge the good work of the Good Food program, but I can't support making an exception to the staff recommendation here because I think it will just lead to a flood of similar requests. And we have to treat organizations fairly. We've modified our fees structure, and we had good discussion about that. And yes, it will take a while for people to adjust, but I think on the whole we have to play by the rules that we have established, and as soon as we start making exceptions for one group that we happen to like, then I think we're setting ourselves up for future problems. So I'm sort of sorry to say that I don't think I can accept the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Prino, Councillor Gesselbrock again, and then Councillor Manley.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Slater. Man, you have a tough job. This is a tough job, and I appreciate that you've come to council with denials, because that's got to be tougher. It's so easy to say yes, and it's so worthwhile to say yes, but to deny is really tough. And I feel similar to Councillor Hammond's, to Councillor Eastmere on the food issue, but I want to support Nanaimo Minor Baseball Association, because I think it's exactly as Mr. Harding said. Not only do we have all this youth come to town, but it's the opportunities for tourism and restaurants and stores and gas stations, and it's good for our community. It's exactly why we take so much care of our turf, at the different areas that we have. So I can't support this. I can't support it the way it's written. I can't say yes to one and no to the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a question through to staff. Is it like a rolling application for other grants? Groups are able to apply for the other grant stream at any point at time of the year, or is it a certain intake at a certain point a year?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Gesselbrock, the other grants program is open all year long, but we do have very limited funds in that expenditure category. It's generally $7,000 a year.
Right.
And so, of course, usually, generally speaking, the earlier you come forward, there's a greater chance that there might be funds available.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think, there's very valid points made by Councillor Hemmons, and you know, it's tricky. This group does really good work, and I know that they're not pulling a profit on anything, and so they probably applied for this grant, you know, because there was a need, and may didn't have time to switch the location or whatnot and adjust to the substantial thing. And I think for myself, I'm still supportive of it, and if we do get another flood of requests for other grants to help with the high rates at the rate change at the Centennial Building, maybe it is something that we do need to revisit. Thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation, and I think there's an issue of fairness here and an issue of policy. I agree with Councillor Hammonds. I worked for Nanaimo Food Share for 3 years. I'm a big supporter of the organization and of this program. This is different than Loaves and Fish's food bank. This is a bulk buy program, and anybody can buy into the Good Food Box, including our senior management or the mayor, all of whom don't need to have a discounted vegetable box. It's a well-funded project. It gets government funding. They use it as a way to raise funds. And I will note that this year, in the past years, in the last number of years, there's been a partnership between Growing Opportunities and Nanaimo Food Share. And last year, Food Share received 20,000 pounds of food from Growing Opportunities at a rate that was about 50% of the wholesale rate that they get from the wholesaler. And they didn't buy any food from Growing Opportunities this year. And that would have represented a savings of $10,000 at least. I see other organizations like Couch and Green Communities that are working together on a food security system where nonprofits, multiple nonprofits and co-ops are working together to develop a really strong food system. And I'm not seeing that here in Nanaimo, and I think it's unfortunate that these groups aren't working together, and I don't understand why. I know that Growing Opportunities, after 7 years of farming it, 5 acres was moved off that property. The lease is under Nanaimo Food Share, but they were growing food there for the Good Food Box. So I don't understand why this is happening. I'd like to see these organizations working together because government funds are limited, government resources are limited, and organizations need to be maximizing their capacity by working together in a really positive manner. So I won't be supporting this motion. I'm going to just stick with the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm with Councillors Hemmons, Manley, Perino, and Thorpe on this one. We're not the Court of Appeal per se. The folks who made the decisions, the recommendations, I should say, in fairness to Council, spent time on doing this. There is policy in place, and Councillor Hemmons is quite right. There are a multitude of worthy organizations in our community doing important work. I think Councillor Perino pointed it out. From an economic perspective, we would do more good, arguably, for the good citizens of Nanaimo by supporting minor baseball in terms of the revenue that hosting a tournament brings to the community. And I'm not going to support giving them the grant either. So I'm with option 1. So for what it's worth, the motion in front of us is option 2. All those in favor of it, Councillors Eastmere and Gesselbrock, and those opposed, Councillors Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Perino, Councillor Manley. The motion is defeated. Would someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Manley. I assume no need for discussion.
Oh, I can't help it. I can't help it.
Councillor Perino.
Can't help it. God, I've worked in the nonprofit field for.
Now, don't be a wet, as Margaret Thatcher would say.
I know. I just, these are such important organizations and so worthy, and both. I mean, I truly, sincerely believe that minor baseball, my God, what could be more important than food? I mean, I'm not sure I can vote in favor of this. I'm really, and then I can almost hear myself saying, and you want to keep taxes low. Like, Yeah, I know. Thank you. Thank you. I won't say any more.
Thank you. All those in favor? Councillors Gesselbrock, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Thorpe, Perino, and Manley, and those opposed. Councillor Eastmere, thank you very much. That was a very good debate. As they always say, the smaller the amount of money, the longer the debate. We're now on to consideration of new permissive tax exemption applications. Ms. Slater again, please.
Thank you. So report number 2, consideration of new permissive tax exemption applications. So we have 2 new PTE, which is the acronym that we use for permissive tax exemptions, applications that have been received for this year, and they're not related to housing. So to note, there's 4 other applications that have been received that relate to housing that will be addressed in the next report after this one. So the first application is for the Canadian Mental Health Association, and that's for the property at 250 Albert Street, which is quite close to City Hall and the Service and Resource Center building, and that property operates an overdose prevention site. Last year, we did give a partial permissive tax exemption for this property, and this year they're coming for the full 100% exemption because there are portions of the building that are no longer leased. The other application is from the Bolinas Housing Society for the head office that they have at Princess Royal Avenue. And so this is lease space that the head office of Bolinas Housing Society has moved into, and they operate their head office operations out of there and administer affordable housing programs. So it's not actually affordable housing itself, it's the administration of the programs. Both of these applications meet the criteria to be issued a permissive tax exemption, and they need to be considered and decisions need to be made on these particular applications because we do need to bring the PTE bylaw forward for 3 readings and adoption at some point before October 31st, which is the legislated deadline.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
I'll move the recommendation and I would like to speak to it.
That's very good. Seconded, Councillor Perino. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Similar to the last topic, in past years, tax exemptions were handled by a committee of council, and it has been turned over for some years now to staff, again, in the interest of impartiality, we'll say, and the rules around permissive tax exemptions on properties are very definite and clear, and there are guidelines that have to be followed and qualified for. So I'm happy to support the recommendation for the 2 successful tax exemptions, but I also want to make comment which will relate to the next item, Your Worship, and that is the denials, because again, it's a similar situation. The rules that we are playing under right now apparently will not allow these ones, and I know some of them will be popular. But I think it's a case of having to look ahead and maybe change the rules, as staff is recommending, at least examine the rules before we can allow them. So I'm going to vote in support of the recommendation here, and I will also be voting in support of the recommendation on the next section of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other speakers on item C. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is D, permissive tax exemption applications related to housing. Ms. Slater, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So this one is interesting. It's new, consideration of permissive tax exemptions related to housing. So this year we've received 4 PTE applications that are related to housing, and more specifically affordable housing and recovery housing. So right now it's important to note that this type of housing is not the same as supportive housing. So supportive housing has a separate BC assessment class. It's class 3. They receive a $1 incidental assessed value, and supportive housing provides daily supports. There's criteria that they need to meet, and generally this type of housing is either owned by the province or very much funded by the province, and the City of Nanaimo receives a payment in lieu of taxes for those properties. So those are the properties that are not in question today. The applications received relate to affordable housing, and of course there's a variety of definitions of affordable housing. So over recent years, affordable housing has become a significant priority in BC, and we've seen BC Housing and the province of BC partner with many different groups in order to have additional housing built. As a result, there are more housing developments than ever before, and they can have different operators, varying levels of rents, and varying levels of subsidies provided. The current grants policy and guidelines document that we have is a number of years old and doesn't actually contemplate permissive tax exemptions for this type of residential housing. Our current policy doesn't really contemplate exemptions for any type of residential housing, with the exception of senior citizens facilities that were constructed between 1947 and 1974. And these properties have a specific exemption in legislation that exists for buildings that were constructed during that time period. But outside of that, residential exemptions haven't been contemplated in the policy that we have. The biggest point that I could probably bring forward today is that issuing permissive tax exemptions for affordable housing projects is something that could have a significant financial impact for City of Nanaimo taxpayers. Staff believe that this is an issue that requires further research to determine the full implications of providing these types of exemptions. But of course, in the meantime, we do have 4 applications in front of us that need to be contemplated in advance of the October 31st permissive tax exemption deadline. So we do need to make decisions on these particular applications, even if further research is to be conducted. So in the interest of fairness and consistency, the staff recommendation is to deny the current applications until the city can do an adequate amount of research to develop a tax exemption policy that addresses these types of properties.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley.
I'm going to move the staff recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons.
And if I could just speak to it quickly. It's hard for me to say, I don't want to give tax exemptions to affordable housing projects in this community, but again, this is an issue of fairness, and I'm actually, recommendation number 5, for staff to review this permissive tax exemption and the options is what I'm interested in seeing come forward and finding a way that we can support all of the different organizations that are involved in affordable housing in the community. There are a broad section of organizations that do provide affordable housing and supportive housing beyond the list that's here, and so I would like to see a process where we can look at how we might support all of these organizations in the good work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe, and then Councillor Perino.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very quickly, I agree with the comments of Councillor Manley. I think I've already explained my reasoning on this and how I will vote. And I just wanted to thank Ms. Slater for elaborating and explaining the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you to Ms. Slater. Reading this late last night and not taking it all in, did you say that some of these are not necessarily all supportive housing or affordable? You're saying that some of it is in fact market rent. Is that correct? Did I hear you right, or am I?
Oh, sorry, through the chair to you, Councillor Perino.
Yes.
The 4 applications we have in front of us are generally speaking for affordable housing or recovery housing, recovery from drug use or alcohol use, that type of thing. But these applications are not from supportive housing entities.
Okay. And have they been given tax exemption at all in the past?
These particular properties, no, these are new applications that haven't previously existed on our PTE bylaws. So they're brand new properties. They're coming online.
Yes.
I know we do have a number of in-stream applications for these types of properties.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support the motion, and I just want to confirm that the staff review of the permissive tax exemptions will be complete by this time next year, so that if we do decide to make a policy change, we'll know by then.
Oh, through the chair to you, Councillor Himmons, absolutely. I would also really like to have this, in front of council so that we can have a policy that does speak to this. So we will be bringing forward a report as soon as possible, in collaboration though with finance and current planning and social planning and everybody that needs to be involved in these discussions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Slater, Ms. Mercer, appreciated. The next is sewer DCC projects. Mr. Sims? Oh, sorry, pardon me, I'm jumping ahead. Ms. Mercer, Ms. Slater, sit down, sorry.
She's good.
BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant. That was real money. How could I jump over that one?
Yeah. The city has an opportunity to submit 2 applications for the Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program. So this program is designed to build a cleaner and greener BC by investing in infrastructure that supports safe, human-powered modes of active transportation for daily commuting to school, recreation, work, socializing, and errands. So the details of this grant are we are allowed to submit 2 applications. It funds 50% of eligible costs up to a maximum of $500,000 per application. And the application deadline is October 27th. So staff have reviewed the project list and are recommending the following projects be submitted. The first is the Bebin-Labio Trail, and this is establishing a trail in Bebin Park along Labio Road from Bebin Parkway to Dorman Road, and that's part of the Nanaimo Operations Center project. And the second is Departure Bay Road South Sidewalk, and that's providing a sidewalk from Allen-a-Dale to Ward Dropper Park would improve the pedestrian infrastructure or network in that area. So staff are looking for a council resolution to accompany the grant application, and we're happy to answer any questions you have on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Perino.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just curious, the project list that was used to do the selection, is it something that council has seen?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Gesselbrock. So with regards to this, they had to be shovel-ready projects.
Mm-hmm.
So those projects are, generally in our, the projects we looked at are in our current plan. So that would be something that council has already approved. Or I think they were all in our current project plan that you would have adopted in the spring.
Just the Labio Trail is the first time that I think I've seen that, or we saw it on the thing. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Your Worship, just to refresh council on that one, it was part of the Nanaimo Operations Center. Typically, with the frontage works and services, the project would be required to build sidewalk, which in this case would be on the public works side of Labio. We proposed and worked interdepartmentally to say a better value for the community would be to put a facility on the south side on the Bebin Park property to continue that loop as per the Bebin Park master plan. So that's where we had that discussion earlier in the spring, I believe, when we sort of brought the entire concept forward for the operations center.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, it's a good amount of money, not a huge amount of money. I guess the couple projects that came to mind was like the lighting on the ENN Trail would have been, I'm not sure if that was considered at all as a potential.
Ms. Fulla, good morning. Welcome.
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrock. So staff did meet and we went through projects. So they needed to be projects that were in the project plan. This isn't 100% grant funding. So for example, lighting on the ENN Trail is not currently in our approved financial plan. So the city doesn't have money set aside. The project's also not shovel ready. And we also had to look at timelines because we want to, if the project was less than $1 million, we need to complete it within a certain time frame to be eligible for the grant. And this is an annual granting program. So we wanted to make sure we picked projects that we could execute in those timelines and would make us eligible next year again to apply for this grant, because the city's been very successful in this grant program and has received grants the last several years under the program.
Okay, great.
So these were really the 2 best projects that were shovel-ready, that we could maximize the amount of funding that we could receive that were in the plan at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino, then Councillor Hemmons.
Simply to move the motion, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seconder? This is Councillor Thorpe. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, I'm just, and I understand where Councillor Gassenbrock is coming from. Lighting obviously would be terrific on the Indian Trail, but the truth is that they had to be shovel-ready projects. So this makes complete sense, and I'm so glad we're going after these grants, and I just hope we keep doing them and hope we get them. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to support the motion. I'm curious about the Departure Bay Road South Sidewalk and if this is the section that we accelerated with the pedestrian unallocated funds, and if that is the case. We switched out a project downtown, an intersection, for this project. Would there be opportunity to do both then? Because if this grant funding is successful.
Worship, I think that's a good...
Mr. Sims.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I think that's a good point. I think good call. So if this grant is successful, we can bring that, the other downtown project back to council for consideration, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No further questions or discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Thorpe, for keeping me on track. The next is the 2023 fleet, sewer, yes, sewer. You can tell I'm anxious to get out of here this morning, can't you? Mr. Rosen.
Thanks,
Given the nature of the news, I'm not sure I'd be fighting over who gets to speak to it.
That's right. I'll take the blame for this one. Thanks, Your Worship. Just briefly, the intent of this report is to provide information to council and express concern about sort of a building issue. We've talked about it verbally over the years, but this, as we're coming into the fall budget process, it's just trying to formalize this concern a little bit. This is largely DCC funding for sewers. Generally, you want to have projects built before you start flushing toilets. And so this is, as areas grow out, we want to make sure that the sewer is ready to be able to receive them. The nature of the DCC bylaw, DCC legislation, and so on of the past has been, typically over a 25-year life, you identify projects that you would build and fund over that 25 years. So that works well in theory, but in practice, as we've seen, rapid growth in the last 5 years and growth all over the city, not in any one particular sewer catchment area. It's kind of, we're running around running back and forth, trying to keep up with the growth and keep ahead of the growth. That's created a pinch for funding. So this is really the awareness we wanted to bring to council. There's potentially a number of strategies that we can do to sort of ease some of the short-term pain, like we've tried borrowing, and in the past several years we've borrowed from other DCC pots, but it's now to the point where the cost of borrowing is exceeding the revenue stream from DCCs to the sewer pot, so that becomes no longer viable. Another option is, of course, to use sanitary sewer user rates, which is creating a burden on the existing users to fund for future growth. So we're feeling, and just wanted to express this with council, that we're feeling sort of pinched in this little box. In future, as we update the DCC bylaw starting this year, the intent is really to look at, to make sure that we kind of find our way out. And one of the most apparent strategies is to crunch the front end load, I guess, the funding, the revenue side, over the 25-year life of the bylaw, if that makes sense. So that's one of the key. And in the meantime, the intent is to watch this carefully, and we have a series of monitors all over, and we're being very careful to make sure that we don't run the risk of overflow. But as you know, the city's so spread out, the sewer system is so spread out, it's hard to balance priority. And then I hate to always mention the inflationary pressures we've seen at the last few years. that's decreased the amount of sewer, the length of sewer that we can build in any 1 year. So that's information Mr. Rosen or myself or Ms. Mercer, Mr. Lindsay as well could answer questions on this issue. One of the, I'll add the one point that we added into city plan was to start to try and focus growth more in the urban nodes, of course, but also to not necessarily allow growth where there's not capacity to service that growth. So that's a high-level policy that may help us in the future as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to jump in, and I know that the business community, the development community will be disturbed by this, because the whole question of DCCs is always a controversial topic. And if someone can answer this, great, and if they can't, so be it. But do we have any idea where we sit relative communities of similar size with respect to our DCCs now? Are we out of line? Are we high? Are we low? Does anyone have a comment?
So this is, Your Worship, this has been 5 years since we've updated the last DCC bylaw, and the question was easily answered then when we you know, I think we tried to keep within line. It's since then, so many things have changed, you know, as specifically the growth that Nanaimo's seen in the last 5 or 6 years has been put a lot of pressure on servicing. So I'm sorry I can't answer the question.
Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up on your thought there, it seems to me that Public Works along with Parks and Recreation are two of the major services that the city is expected to supply to its citizens. And we've just undergone a fees and services review for Parks and Recreation, which was 5 to 7 years in the making, and now we're hearing that our DCC policy is similarly about 5 years behind and needs to be reviewed. And I think that's a very valuable information for us to hear at the council table. And I look forward to that review and see where we do stand compared to other communities and what we can do to help ourselves in this regard without harming the development community too greatly. But I just appreciate Mr. Sims drawing this to our attention. It's a very important topic, and as we deal with financial planning and upcoming budgets, it's something we really have to keep near the top of our thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through so do we have a DCC review scheduled?
Your Worship, it's some of the technical work is already underway, and between our departments, we're coordinating bringing that bylaw forward. I think the initial hope was this fall, but it looks like it's going to be next year.
Okay, and does that mean like we'll update our whole DCC process? It'll
correct.
And then just there's like, you know, 3 options that we have, you know, funding urgent projects from sewer reserves, limit increased sewer flows upstream, and then, you know, just rolling the dice. Are these options going to be just taken on a case-by-case basis when we're looking at large, you know, developments that'll be going in, depending on where they are in the city?
Your Worship, that's exactly correct. I think I reflect back to the 1990s when the Millstone trunk was found to be under its capacity, and there was a moratorium placed for a few years on rezonings in that particular catchment until we could get ahead of the, and that would be something similar if like, we really, staff is really, you know, sensitive to the fact that we don't want to go there. That's a, you know, we don't want to limit opportunities for housing and growth and development. That's critical. So we want to try and keep ahead of this. But Your Worship, as Councillor Gesselbrock noted, these would be a case by case. You know, if we have a problem flaring up, we'll try and address it as quickly as we possibly can.
And just on that, in the cases like rezoning is one area where we do have control of. There's some areas that are already zoned that we probably can't support at this moment, and that do we have control in limiting development permits in those sites, or is that more the province, like through the subdivision process without, we can't really do much to say about that, or is that always taken into account?
Your Worship, I think when it comes to pre-zoned properties, we're limited in our options, and I don't think we do have much. However, I think part of the putting this report out there is to just raise the awareness and not get to that point. We don't want to get to a point where we're denying occupancy permits because the residents can't flush their toilets. We'd never ever want to get to that point. So we're trying to be in advance of that as much as possible.
Great, and do we already have a sense of what areas are at risk? Like that's pretty well mapped out?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Sims or Mr. Rosen? Councillor Eastmere?
As far as the areas that have been mapped out as potentially problematic, can that information be provided to council so we have a sense of what those are?
So the area that's typically of concern for sewer DCC projects, they tend to be at the bottom end of sewer catchments. So like the topography has a catchment, and the larger sewers tend to be at the bottom, and those are the ones that typically fall into the sewer DCC program. So the sewer DCC program is actually a council bylaw, and all the projects are listed within that bylaw. And I think we could certainly share the old one. We have, in the process, as Mr. Sims mentioned, we're in the process of developing a new project package for council's consideration with the next bylaw update. So we're in the process of working on that. So that's not really ready to share yet. But I think a lot of the sewers that haven't been upgraded yet, they would still be the same project. So we could certainly share that part of it.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm reminded that my retired brother-in-law is a civil engineer, and what did he say? I won't phrase it as crudely as he did. What did he learn in engineering? Poop doesn't run uphill in paydays on Friday. So the answer we just received, I think, rather sums it up. When we're getting down to the line along the waterfront, what's going on uphill is really important. I'm very appreciative, all joking aside, I'm very appreciative of this report, and it's a good signal to the community. There is a consequence to, well, having children, living here, moving here, and there's only so much capacity can be done. I'm actually surprised if 5 kilometers of upgrades for 14.3 million seems like a bargain to me. I'm going to assume if we were spending or upgrading 5 kilometers, be a lot more over the next 5 years. Is that fair to say? So we're getting fair warning here this morning, Mr. Sims. Yes.
I think you're correct, Your Worship. The amount, the length of sewer that we can upgrade for the same money is starting to shrink on us, which also adds a bit of pressure. But I'd say it's really the rate at which we collect DCC revenue is not quick enough, not fast enough to respond to the growth that's happening, the explosive growth, I might add, all over the city. So that's what's creating the largest pinch point for us. So strategies to deal with that over the next year or two will be coming forward, and hopefully that'll allow us to catch up.
Seeing no one else, thank you very much. Very appreciative of this morning. We're now on to the 2023 Fleet Replacement Plan. And again, Mr. Sims, please.
Your Worship, thank you. Mr. Miller is here as well, our Fleet Services Manager. He's happy to speak to any of the questions that Council may have. But just briefly to summarize the report, again, the sort of frustration for all of us is that some of the long lead times and challenges we've had with the supply chain, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry to bring this up again. But we've experienced on fleet, similar to anybody buying a car, long delivery times. And we've seen 18 to 24 months on some of the vehicles we ordered a while ago, only to have those orders canceled at the last minute and being repriced. So that's created, with new higher prices, and across North America we've seen significant increase in cost. So staff have mitigated this as much as possible, delaying purchases, where it's appropriate. However, there's that sweet spot where, you know, we're trying to optimize expenditure on the lowest life cycle cost. So if you delay a purchase, your repair costs go up and so on. So really, the fleet reserve, the equipment depreciation fund, has sufficient funding to allow for a transfer to make up the shortfall for the 2023 vehicles purchase, which is a total of 21 vehicles at, I think it was $2.8 million.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims, and thank you, Mr. Miller. And I think Mr. Lindsay could testify to the rising price of vehicles in the community and what a second-hand vehicle might secure if it has to be replaced, from personal experience. Any questions?
I'll move for information.
Moved by Councillor Hemmons. We have a seconder with Councillor Thorpe. No need for discussion. Councillor Eastmere, sorry.
Excuse me, I have a question through you to staff. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, are we doing like a fleet study as well?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Eastmere, we are currently in the EV readiness study. We have a contractor that's working on that currently. We should have that completed by end of the year. So that's going to be a real roadmap for us on where we're going with our EVs, with our electric vehicles. Currently, we have 12 passenger cars in the fleet, 3 ICE resurfacers, but we're looking to see where exactly we are currently and where we can go, and also the infrastructure requirements that will bring. So we're actively working with our consultant on that right now, and should have something by end of the year, which is very exciting.
Is there potentially information in that fleet study that could impact the amount of money that we would need to add to this budget?
Well, the study will take into account our capital projects and the budget that we currently have set out each year for our replacements. So at this time, I don't think so. The study will just be basically a roadmap on how many EVs we can possibly replace, and then in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that looks like. Also right now, mainly what does the medium duty market look like, and the heavy duty truck market look like, and where we can go from there. That's where we really want to get to, because that's going to really impact our emissions as we can start replacing our heavier duty vehicles. Currently, right now, we're doing our light duty as much as we can. Happy to say we've ordered 2 light duty trucks for this year. So those will be the first pickup trucks that are fully EV for the city. We hope to see those end of the year, could be early next year. I've stopped making promises, I think, on the delivery dates. So, but that's exciting. We want to test those and see how they work for the departments before we kind of move all in on the EV market. We want to make sure that we're doing this systematically.
And are we also kind of looking for opportunities for like vehicle sharing between staff, so that we're not adding to our fleet, you know, in the way that we might have done in past years, but now recognizing, you know, energy consumption and things like that, trying to really scale down the amount of vehicle usage?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we've increased, as we get these vehicles back that need to be replaced after their 10-year life cycle is done, we have been increasing our pool of vehicles, essentially, for Public Works and for our downtown offices. We noticed a big increase in labor in the summer months, where different departments are bringing on staff for summer or short-term staff. So we have increased that pool of vehicles that we, as a fleet department, can lend out, essentially. So we're not having to go out and go to other rental agencies. To that point as well, we're currently actually looking for a fleet sustainability coordinator, which is a position we have within fleet. A part of that position will be looking at our entire utilization as an organization. What vehicles are possibly underutilized? Are there opportunities to possibly scale back some of those vehicles and increase more of a rideshare program and increase that pool of vehicles? So that's going to be a big part of that position, and look at the sustainability portion of that. Look at utilization, look at the kilometers that we're currently traveling back and forth in the city, and how can we reduce our emissions. So yes, we're looking at that for sure.
We're looking to hire someone to do that for us.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be a part of their job description, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, motion's been made. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Eastmer is opposed. Thank you. The next, Mr. Miller, Mr. Sims, thank you. The next item is the Nanaimo Area Land Trust funding. Ms. Mercer, you're going to introduce this?
Yes. So in June, the city received a request to increase funding by $5,000 for the Nanaimo Area Land Trust, or NALT. And the request is to increase the annual funding from $35,000 to $40,000 starting in 2023. So our current financial plan was adopted in May with funding for NALT coming from taxation. So as the current budget is set, any additional funding would be needed to come from reserves, as taxation is no longer a funding option. So the staff recommendation is to deny the $5,000 increase, as there is no specific budget for this in 2023. The second is to add a decision slide for council to consider during the 2024 to 2028 financial plan deliberations that will hold in the fall. And this will allow council time to consider the request along with all of the other budget items. The third recommendation is to apply up to a maximum of 5-year term on any operating funding agreement and require annual reporting to council as part of the financial plan presentations. So almost all of the city's operating grants have a set time frame, as well as specific criteria in order to obtain their funding. Most operating grants come through the culture operating grant stream, and they have 1 or 3-year terms and are required to submit reporting for their operations each year. However, there are a couple of historically funded organizations that are handled differently, and NALT is one of them, where there is no time frame, so it's open-ended, and there's no specific criteria to adhere to other than supplying the city with financial statements. So by instituting a term and reporting requirement, it would ensure that all operating funding is treated the same, and as well as being best practice. And so this would provide the organization with guaranteed funding for a set period of time, as well as give council the opportunity to annually review how the funds are being spent. So we're happy to answer any questions the committee has on this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you for this. I'm curious about the 5-year terms. So the organizations that already have term agreements, they're able to apply again for another term, but it's just a process of applying, being able to justify how the money's spent and ensure that there's some accountability for what's happening.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Your Worship, we do have a delegation too, as well. I just wanted to remind council.
Sorry?
We do have
Yes.
a delegation as well. I just wanted to remind council. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman?
I have a question first.
Oh, Councillor Hemmons has a question first.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Your Worship. I note in the report that we receive financial reporting from NALT. Does that include the entire organization's financial reporting, so we can see our contribution in relation to their charitable donations?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Hemmons, yes, their financial statements break down the different types of revenue they receive, as well as their expenditures.
And do we, if I may follow up, do we ever look at if there's corresponding increases in charitable donations to correspond, does that correspond at all to city increases? And the reason I'm asking is that NALT is a charitable organization, as I understand it, and I'm curious if we wait, at what point, I'm trying to find the right words to say this, does it become a city-funded organization versus a charity? So if their charitable contributions are going down, but their city funds are increasing, are they still are we still seeing them as a charitable organization, or are we just now funding NALT?
Right, so to answer your question, to be in all honesty, there isn't much rigor put around the financial statements. We The criteria is we receive them, we file them. So that's why we're cleaning up how we deal with grants, so they're cleaner. There's very specific criteria, timelines, etc. So that is how that could be one of the things that we look at with funding for this organization.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chapman, please. You know the drill. Introduce yourself for the record. 5 minutes, and I'll give you a notice at 1 minute. Thanks for coming this morning.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Paul Chapman, the Executive Director of the Nanaimo and Area Land Trust, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. I'll speak to the recommendations. The number two, out of order, of course. Number two seems to be an internal process that I don't fully understand, but I assume that's something that has to be done. So, that sounds like a good recommendation to me. Number three, I embrace the opportunity to have that annual reporting. I think it's something that's been missing. And I'm happy to sing the praises of NALT. In fact, I've written a few lyrics up for today. So we're a charitable organization founded in 1995. Currently, we have 3 part-time staff, and then we have some contract positions that are project-based. We, in 2022, because that's the last year of our approved financials that are prepared by an accountant. In 2022, we had 128 volunteers donate 2,544 hours of volunteer time. Our donations from members and supporters were at $150, almost $2,000, and our total revenues were at $383,000. When you combine the in-kind volunteer support, the return on the city's support in the 35,000 is about a 14 to 1. So every dollar we receive from the city, we're able to leverage for 14 to 1. So it's really important to us as having that as a foundational funding that we can then leverage to get those other funds. Some of those are charitable receipts, and others are grants from other entities, BC Gaming grants, what have you. So what does that look like? With regards to the watersheds in the cities, we're in Knox Creek, Holden Creek, Nanaimo River, Beck Creek, Richards Creek, Chase River, Cat Stream, Millstone River, Hanault Creek, Departure Creek, Cottle Creek, and Wally Creek. And in those watersheds, we carry on projects such as water quality monitoring, ecosystem restoration, ecosystem enhancement, pollinator paradise project, Western Painted Turtle Ambassador and Survey, Bat Ambassadors and Surveys. We have a committee of Cat Stream Streamkeepers and Wally Creek Streamkeepers, and we support the Departure Creek Streamkeepers in their work. We sit on the Nanaimo River Watershed Roundtable. We participate in activities with the city, such as Rivers Day and Water to Earth Month. We have a school water stewards project that we've been running for 4 years that, similar to some stuff mentioned earlier today, was about connecting students to land and water, to their watersheds. We do lake water quality monitoring, salamander surveys. We have an excellent collaborative relationship with lots of different city staff from different departments, as well as regional and provincial and federal staff as well. At the end of 2022, our anticipated expenses were lower than our actual expenses, and we ended up with a $3,200 deficit carrying into 2023. Our budgeting for 2023, we anticipated a 3.3% increase, and some of those things we're able to lock in, like we're able to lock in some of our contracts at that level, but other things, like everyone else, they come at you and keep coming at you. And so, as Bill Sims said, the recurring theme of inflationary pressure. And so we're experiencing that in 2023, and that's why we're asking for that $5,000.
1 minute.
And again, I really look forward to recommendation number 3 in terms of that reporting and that certainty around a block of funding. I think that's a fabulous thing. But to be able to operate at our anticipated level of operations for 2023, that $5,000 would really be quite useful to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Under time as well. Questions for the delegation? I just want to say on behalf of the community, as someone who knew Barb Hurston very well, it was the first board I ever served on, was with her on Planned Parenthood, actually, golly, 40 years ago, and Gail Adrian, and I think the whole community very much appreciates the work of NALT.
Thank you.
Having said that, Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. I'm inclined to move option 2. I think the $5,000 from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve one time for this year is not a huge hit given the work that gets done. And then basically well, I'll move it first and then speak to it.
Seconded, Councillor Eastmere. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Yeah, I think the $5,000 from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund is not a huge hit at all. And it's one time, and then we'll have the decision slide during the 24 to 28 financial plan deliberations to see if we want to fund that additional $5,000 sustainably through increase in taxation. And then we would, effective the 2024-21, apply the 5-year term exactly as option 1. So put that on the floor for debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support this motion. We just turned down funding of $5,000 to the Nanaimo Minor Baseball Association, as well as the Nanaimo Food Share Society. I can't support this. However, I do like the second and the third addition to this motion, but I can't support it when we're not giving funding to the Food Share Society and minor baseball. I can't support this either. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I don't think we're here debating the merits of NALT. We all understand what they contribute to our community. But for me, as I think Councillor Perino was pointing out, this is about fairness and consistency in our practices. And we, earlier in this meeting, denied additional funding until the next budget cycle with an opportunity then to review. And that's exactly what option 1 is proposing. And aside from the fact that, in my opinion, I think we have been pretty generous in our support of NALT over the years through the city and through the regional district. I would prefer to go with option 1. And again, it's all about consistency and fairness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm supportive of the position taken by Councillors Perino and Thorpe, and Councillor Gesselbrock probably would appreciate this, but he helps support my position by saying $5,000 isn't that much one way or the other. The more important thing for me here today is consistency and fairness, and certainly I think Mr. Chapman, on behalf of NALT, has made it very clear they don't have any expectation they should be treated differently than anyone else. And the process is the process, and I am a great believer in fairness, and it has to be applied across the board. As Councillor Perino pointed out, we turned down 2 worthy organizations this morning on the recommendation of staff, and I'm not satisfied that we should go against the recommendation of staff today in these circumstances. So having said that, I would be prepared to support option 1, but I can't support option 2. Thank you. Councillor Eastmere, pardon me, Councillor Manley, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the work that NALT does and in the community, and I understand that there is a cash crunch, and we've seen this from a number of organizations, and with trying not to get the tag of Dr. Deny today, but I think it's a matter of consistency and fairness. We have turned down other applications today from other very good organizations, including the ones that were seeking tax exemptions, and I'm torn about all of these things because I'd like to be spreading money out to all of these organizations, but there is a process, and there is we need to be consistent, we need to be fair, and I'm looking forward to seeing these other things implemented so that there is a constant, consistent process for organizations to follow in terms of funding and getting consistent funding over a longer term, so that they're not having to apply every year, go through a process every year, but to know that there's consistency and fairness in the process. So I'm leaning towards option one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere?
Just around when we're discussing the staff recommendations, and when there's a situation like this where there isn't the money, so staff are limited as far as their recommendations. They literally can only make one recommendation, right? If for example, with the other grants, if we fully exhausted that money, their only option is to say deny, and we're the only ones who, as council, who have the ability to decide whether to spend strategic infrastructure reserves. So when we talk about the staff recommendation, it's not like they had the option to recommend that we spend it out of the strategic infrastructure reserves. Is that?
Ms. Mercer?
Yes. Through your worship, yes, that is correct. Like that is council's money to spend, and we go, if we don't have the money in the budget, that's always an option. But if, it's not, we put that option forward, but it is ultimately your decision whether you do that or not.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, yeah, it's just, I think it's something that's important for council to keep in mind when we're making decisions on this, that the staff recommendation could only go one way on these things. And that's why we're here, to make the judgment call when it's a special circumstance. So, yeah, appreciate everyone's comments on this and ready to vote.
All right, the motion is option 2, is proposed by, Councillor Gesselbrock. Mr. Harding?
Your Worship, just want to make sure council was aware when they vote on number 3, the 2 other organizations, that it does impact, so there's no surprise. So the 2 other organizations would be Vancouver Island Exhibition, which gets $12,000 a year in perpetuity, and Pacific Sport, which gets $15,000 a year. So just want to make sure council is aware and not surprised. Those are the only 2 that we're aware of that are similar to this situation. Others are more fee-for-service types of agreements, like Port Theatre, art gallery, museum, things like that do more of a fee-for-service.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock?
I'm just not sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm not entirely clear. There's going to be more requests for us to pull money out of the strategic infrastructure reserve from other organizations. I'm just, those 2 groups, I didn't see them in.
No, I'm sorry, Your Worship. I'm just saying, on option 3, those are the 2 other organizations that if council approves that policy, the 5-year maximum, those 2 organizations would be impacted eventually. So they would fall under that 5-year. Right now, those 2 organizations never have to come back to council.
Oh, okay.
Similar to what NALT's never had to come back to council for renewal of funding. Those 2 organizations would be impacted by number 3. Just letting you know, so in case you get it, once we've let them know that council's done this, just so you know that those 2 organizations would fall into the same.
Great. I'm sorry, I was just the 2 other organizations in the report, but you're just saying that we're going to have to do the same 5-year process to these organizations.
They will fall under, what council approves this policy, or the committee and then council, those 2 would fall under that.
Roger. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers, comments, questions? Councillor Gesselbrock is supporting option 2. All those in favor? Councillors Eastmere and Gesselbrock, and those opposed, Councillors Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Perino, and Manley. Motion is defeated. Someone care to make the recommended motion? Move Councillor Thorpe. Seconded Councillor Hemmons. I'm assuming no need for discussion. All those in favor? Well, that was everybody. Yes? Thank you. Very good. Time for the morning break, Ms. Gurry.
Tiana.
Hey.
It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
Welcome to the city's South Fork Water Treatment Plant. This is where we take water that we would collect in our lakes and rivers, pipe it, we filter it and treat it before we send it off to the city's distribution system in your taps. This facility actually does a better job than most home filtration systems. The water that comes into your home that you use every day, that you bathe in every day, that you wash your clothes in every day, is cleaner than anything you can get anywhere.
Here you see filtration in action. It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's nothing to really see. But if you look in the tank, you'll see the froth on the top. That's dissolved organic matter, and when we aerate the tank, that froths up, and that's why that's up there.
We take all the little particles, all the organic matter, any insects or bugs that might be in the water, and pathogens that we're trying to filter out, they're all gone. We filter the water using a series of membranes.
So what we're looking at here is a membrane filtration module. So when I talk about the membranes filtering the water, this is what we're filtering the water with. And while you might think that the water flows through like the baleen of a whale, it's not true. These are hollow fiber membranes. So each of these little tiny strands are hollow, just like a shoelace. And the membrane is wrapped around the outside of these tiny little hollow fibers. So these sit in a bath of water, raw water, and then we pull the water through the wall of the straw or the shoelace, and then it travels along and it collects in this vessel at the end here. And this hole at the end is where we pull the water out.
And the membranes are like an almost impermeable waterproof layer that we pull the water through. So now we're just left with clean, pure drinking water. Take care.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other 2 arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
This is a plug catch basin. We have 10,000 plus of these in the city of Nanaimo with over 600 kilometers of road. Maintenance staff can't be everywhere at once. So we don't ask a lot for the city of Nanaimo residents, but if they know that they have one of these catch basins, clear it off with a shovel or a rake. Do not use your hands. If this gets plugged, you could ultimately flood a neighbor around the corner, flood a road, which is prone to hydroplaning. And if you're lucky enough that you have a green bin, by all means, throw the compost into the green bin. And if you don't, throw it into a composting pile. It's just going to make a lot of the roads much more clear once we have the debris lifted off. During a snow event, the catch basin can be plugged with snow. The resident knows the proximity of the catch basin. By all means, grab a shovel or a rake, don't use your hands, and clear it off again. This is ultimately going to save you from flooding the road or your neighbor. You know, as much as we want help cleaning the plug catch basins off, please do not assist us by trying to unplug a culvert. Call the city yard. They have 24/7 service. It's 250-758-5222. And also there is sandbags and sand available. Just bring a shovel.
Council expenses for the 6 months ending 2023, June 30th. Ms. Mercer, please. Good morning.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report provides a summary at June 30th of the year-to-date expenses for each member of council. So this information is compiled all year and is reported in the Statement of Financial Information, or the SOFI report, at the end of the year. So I just want to make a note that budgets for 2024 will reflect the changes that were made to the council spending and amenities policy. So unfortunately, the changes made to that policy were adopted after the budget for 2023 was approved. So those changes are not reflected in 2023. So you may notice that on some of your reports. So this is for information only, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Manley?
I may have just missed it because I was getting some other information in my ear there. But the budget, just looking at my own budget, going to FCM this year, the cost of hotels has increased substantially. I'm 150% of my budget for going to FCM, and I'm just wondering, are we going to see an adjustment just based on inflation for councillors who want to attend these important conferences?
So through your worship to Councillor Manley, yes. The changes that were made to the council spending and amenities policy came into effect after the 2023 budget was approved. So you will see those changes come for 2024. So when we do the budgets for next year, you'll see more appropriate budgeting for each one of those events, because it was a set amount set in that policy, which has now, with cost inflation, are no longer relevant. So you will see that in 2024.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Eastmere.
I was going to remove the report for information. Move that we accept the report for information.
I don't think we have to.
Great.
No, we're good.
It's just a report. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. I would just like to say that as my expenses appear the highest of everyone on council, there has been some criticism of that, and just from general public. And I would just like to say that it's been an amazing learning opportunity to be able to attend these conferences and to connect with people and to go to community events, and especially with it being my first year on council, I did take every opportunity to go to all of these conferences, and yeah, it's helped me a lot to better understand my role, and I'm just really grateful for the opportunity, and yeah, I really appreciate that this is built into our budget so that we can take these opportunities to become better representatives in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't let it pass. I think that criticism is ridiculous, and I'm so grateful that you're an engaged councillor and taking every learning opportunity that you have in front of you to do a better job at this table with all of us. I'm sorry you're facing that.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to comment on this too, because my expenses are very low. I haven't attended the other conferences this year, matter of personal choice. My strong view is that every councillor should attend where reasonably possible or logical for them. The reality is that the kind of networking, the information, the learning experience for both FCM and the UBCM are important for councillors. There's nothing the public, or the media I should say in fairness, loves to focus on as much as they do the expenses of politicians. But we're not ordering, $10 glasses of orange juice willy-nilly. The fact is, it is work, and it is away from home, and it is time away from family, and it's important. It's the only way you get these experiences. They're not invented to provide some happy holiday for politicians. Just as our senior staff attend conferences and undertake learning experiences, just as members of any professional organization have the same kinds of events annually. Just as there's training in every workplace if you're in a well-run business or a managed operation. The fact is, you could argue that by not attending, I'm not doing a service to the people of Nanaimo this year. I should have probably gone and picked up a few things. Having said that, I'm still going to enjoy a holiday during UBCM, and I'm not going to apologize for that. But I think it's important to emphasize what Councillor Eastmere has pointed out about herself, her own experience, and what Councillor Hemmons has said. So having said that, let us move on unless there's further commentary. The next is financial results for the 6 months ending June 30th, 2023. Ms. Mercer, please.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with the financial results of the city at June 30th. And this report includes information on both the day-to-day operations as well as projects. So we'll start with the operating results first. At the end of Q2, we're projecting a $3,228,300 surplus for all three funds. And that's broken down by $3,918,700 surplus for the general fund, a $28,200 surplus for the sewer fund, and we're anticipating a deficit of $718,600 for the water fund. Excuse me. Attachment A gives a brief description of the variances over $100,000, and Attachment B gives an overview of all the operating variances by department. So the biggest drivers of the general surplus, the first one is position vacancies. So a good portion of the surplus comes from multiple vacancies throughout the city, and we're still struggling to fill some positions. So the longer it takes us to fill the position, the more variance it comes from that. We're trying our hardest, but sometimes the market is just not responsive. So the second item is we're anticipating $400,000 more in interest revenue, or interest income. And as rates have been rising substantially, we've been able to obtain better returns on our excess funds. So that's pushing us in a positive direction. We're anticipating $354,000 more in building inspection revenues this year. And the last kind of bigger item is the RCMP contract. So with member vacancies still being high within the RCMP detachment, we're anticipating that contract to be under budget by $700,000. So those are the big drivers of that $3.9 million surplus expected there. The sewer utility, some various small variances make up the $28,000. And for the water fund, we have water user fees are expected to be under budget by about $800,000, and that's offset by position vacancies of about 100, so they net out to about the $718,000. Keep in mind, this is projection as at June. We haven't gone through the summer months, and it always, summer's always drier, potentially higher water usage. So we could see a much different number by the end of the year. Q2 is often more conservative than what we actually experience at the end of the year. So just a few notes on that. With regards to surplus allocation at the end of the year, if you recall, per our reserve policy, any reserve that falls below its minimum balance will be topped up first using surplus, and the remaining will be allocated based on staff and council recommendations. So it's anticipated that we will need some surplus to top up the financial stability, the financial stability reserves for all three funds with surplus at the end of the year. So for the general financial stability reserve, we're anticipating needing $1,137,000 there, and because staff have recalculated the minimum balances, we do that every few years, and so we now have new minimum balances. And so it's likely that we're going to need that $1.2 million increase to that reserve out of surplus. $100,000 is expected to be needed to top up the sewer financial stability reserve. So as the surplus in this fund is projected to be less than the allocation needed, we would reduce the annual transfer to the sewer operating reserve if necessary. So in the budget each year, an allocation to the sewer operating reserve is budgeted. And so if we don't have sufficient surplus, we would just reduce that allocation to that reserve and take the money to increase the other. And the last one is we are expecting to need $48,945 to update the Water Financial Stability Reserve. Now, as there is a deficit projected in this fund, the annual transfer to the Water Operating Reserve that is budgeted would be reduced if necessary. It's the same as how we deal with the sewer fund. So, and we can't run a deficit in municipal government, so we would have to use reserves to fund any deficit there. So those are, at this point, those are the only ones that we feel that would need surplus to cover those minimum balances. So next we have projects. So the purpose of this information is to provide the committee with a summary of the status of 2023 projects as at June 30th. So this includes both operating and capital projects. And as with past years, we've broken them down into 4 status categories. One being complete or substantially complete, in progress, not started, or on hold, delayed, or other. So the total project budget for 2023 is just over $168.5 million. And the amount spent or committed at June 30th is $96.1 million. So that leaves $72.4 million in funding still to be spent. So that equals about 57% of the budget has either been spent or committed as at June 30th. So 14% of the projects are completed or substantially complete. 65% is in progress. 19% have not been started, and 2% is on hold, delayed, or not started for another reason. Keep in mind, this is at June. Our busy construction season is over the summer, so these numbers will change. Attachment C gives an overview of the summary of projects in each division and highlights some bigger projects in each area. So that's a brief overview of this report, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just toggling between appendices here. This was a really interesting report. I always find these very interesting. The piece you note about a huge part of our surplus is vacancies, I think is really important. I note that our deficits, of which we have 2, one I have a question of, one is just a comment. The parks deficit is related to security and general maintenance of our parks. I think that probably reflects accurately our need for increased security and monitoring of our public spaces. The transportation deficit, $242,000, it's the only explanation in the report that talks about an anticipation of higher than budgeted snow and ice removal costs. So did we not budget accurately? How are we forecasting debt based on a season that isn't upon us yet?
So through your worship to Councillor Hemmons, with snow and ice, we take an average and you over a number of years, I think it's 5, that we try to estimate if it's going to be a big snow year or not. Like, we take an average, and if we get a lot more snow, then we go over budget. We do have a reserve that if we needed to, we could pull money from that reserve to cover snow and ice overages. But if we have surplus, we let surplus take that rather than pulling it from the reserve. So it's not a matter of not budgeting accordingly. We try to budget, yes, on an average. So some years we don't spend it all, and other years we spend more than we've budgeted, and we do have the ability, if needed, to pull from the reserve to cover any overages.
Okay, so the higher than anticipated costs for that cost center are related to our previous winter. They're not in anticipation of what we think is coming. Okay.
Correct. And I do know that, again, as everybody else has been saying, cost increases were higher than what we had anticipated too for snow removal contracts and things like that. So they came in a bit higher, I believe, than what we had anticipated. So that contributed to it as well.
Thank you. I also found it interesting. I can see I'm the only one on the speakers list, so I'm just going to keep going. I found it interesting that the drought. What? try. I found it really interesting that the drought is actually impacting our bottom line in terms of water, because our conservation is happening. We're doing it very well, and as a result, we're not making the same revenue. That's very interesting to me. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the other question I had in another appendices. Oh, the last appendix, we have $1 million for homelessness community response, and I believe that's saying that's spread across 36 projects. Am I reading that correctly? It stood out to me. The major projects are listed along the right-hand side. Project results, we have, and it says homelessness community response, $1 million budget in progress. And I'm just not familiar with a $1 million kind of funding envelope for homelessness, but then I note that it's referencing multiple projects. So it's maybe just a bundling.
I apologize. I will have to look up what that is and get back to you on that, because off the top of my head, I'm not sure what all of that $1 million entails.
Okay, it's not urgent. And I just want to say, because I'm proud, that the Harewood Centennial Turf Fields, Westwood Lake improvements, Marie Davidson Bike Park upgrades, and the Stadium District upgrades are all in progress. And I just think that represents really good work on behalf of the community. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Only if Councillor Hemmings doesn't want to ask more questions. Didn't mean to cut her off. No, I just wanted to, as I think I've done before, but rightly so, compliment our financial staff. Our department does an amazing job each year in managing the city budget. And when I note in the report that our anticipated surplus for this fiscal year will be just over $3 million, and some people will look at that and say, gee, the city's $3 million over budget, why were my city taxes so high? And I point out, as the report does, that over $1 million of that will be needed to top up our reserve funds. And given that the city is not legislatively allowed to run a budget, and given that our annual budget is over $200 million, then the anticipated surplus will come out, in my very rough math, to something like maybe 1%. So in other words, we're running close to the line, just above the line, which we need to be, and I think that's an amazing accomplishment. So no wonder our finance department wins awards, and thank you for your good work.
I'll be as brief as I can be. Ditto. Any further questions or comments with respect to this? If not, thank you very, very much. The next is item K, quarterly purchasing report, single and sole source purchases in excess of $250,000 and instances of non-compliance purchases.
Thank you. So this is for the period April 1st to June 30th. And attachment 1 outlines the sole and single source purchases. Attachment 2 outlines purchases over 250. And there were 2 instances of non-compliance with the procurement policy for the quarter, and they're outlined in attachment 3. In both of these instances, the scope of the project grew beyond the original expectation, and it was more feasible to use the existing vendor rather than go to market. So that's the reasoning for both of those. And staff are here to answer any questions that you may have regarding this report.
I don't see anything jumping out at anybody. Thank you. We are on then to quarterly budget transfer report. Again, Ms. Mercer, please.
Me again. So a requirement of the budget transfer policy is to disclose to council when a transfer results in a new project totaling over $75,000. The transfer is over $100,000, or a delay or cancellation of a project has resulted. So previously, an information report was required each time one of these criteria was met. So in an effort to be more efficient, these reports will now be consolidated and reported on a quarterly basis rather than if it happened 5 times, you get 5 reports. This way you'd get one report every quarter. So this is the first quarterly report, and it will cover both quarters 1 and 2 for 2023, but going forward, you'll get a report for each quarter. So there have been 5 instances in the first 6 months of 2023 where transfers have resulted in being over $100,000 or delayed or canceled. So details on each of these incidences are outlined in the report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding them.
Dan, thank you very much. I mean, obviously, it's a bit of a disappointment to see the town site cemetery gateway pagoda repairs slip off the agenda. I think it's an important part of this community's history, but I compliments to staff for balancing and pulling back where they have to and throwing in a little more where they can. Mr. Sims, please.
Your Worship, thanks for that segue. I think it is an important project, and we're disappointed, but the driver was contaminated materials within the existing structure that we would have to be remediated before repairs could be undertaken. So that's it still needs to happen, and staff are excited to make it happen. It just needs a little bit more funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No questions on quarterly budget transfer report. The next is the Rotary Bowl Improvement Project. Mr. Harding, you're going to introduce it, or are we just tossing this to Mr. Groot?
I'll start off, Your Worship, if I could. So since Council purchased those properties, we've been able to do a number of investments over the years and slate Rotary Bowl particularly to host a number of major events. Next year, we have been awarded the BC High School Provincial Championships in May-June. And then in 25, we have the BC Senior Summer Games. And then we have a bid in to host the 26 and 27 Legion Track and Field Games, which is a major event. With that, though, be ready for some of those major events, we do have to do some improvements by June next year. We initially hope to have this in Council as part of the 24 capital budget deliberations, but we're just worried about timing given the supply chain situations that we have. We just don't want to be not ready to host the BC provincials. And so we're asking to add some funds in for this year so we could get the works underway now and completed by spring of next year. Mr. Groot's here to answer any of the details on the 4 components that we're looking for. Majority of it's on the 2 cages that we need to do to allow for throwing events. And then the others is to get irrigation back onto the main bowl area. And then there's some other details on paving. So, but willing to answer any detailed questions you have on the project. But that's kind of the motivation, is to get this ready for these events.
Thank you. Not seeing any. I was going to say, does Mr. Groot want to even say hello this morning? We just brought him here to look pretty.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. Thank you.
Well, that was short and sweet. Councillor Hemmons has moved the recommended motion, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Sorry?
If I may.
Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, happy to
I'm
support
rushing
that.
ahead.
No, but I can't resist the opportunity to point out that one of the items mentioned that we have just approved is equipment for the hammer cage facility, and I hope all listeners will recognize or already know that a Nanaimo athlete a couple of months ago won a world championship title in hammer throw. So Ethan Katzberg, we're all proud of you. Thank you.
Going to the Olympics.
Yes.
Well done, Councillor Thorpe. Well done. Good catch.
Oh.
Your Worship, if I could add to that. Your Worship, if I could add to that for people's knowledge, and Council I think knows this, is that the way the track and field is now, and with these improvements we'll even enhance it, is we can do major events. So for example, we're very close to get the 2024 national track and field event, which would have been the Olympic qualifying event. And we didn't get for 24, but we definitely feel we're set up to get the next ones with that. So it's a top-notch facility, and it's able for us to do national type events there.
Very good news for the community. Very good news for the city, as Councillor Perino has just pointed out. All right, thank you, Mr. Groot. for stepping down and saying hello. There is a piece of correspondence which has largely been dealt with during the discussions around NALT. We have no other business that I'm aware of. I'm going to assume there's nothing on the question period sheet. And having got to that portion of the agenda, would someone care to make a motion? Move for adjournment. Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much to staff for all the work that went into getting this morning together and for attendance.